So I'll just give you a little bit of history. So he's born in London, moved to South Africa during the war, came back to England for school at Eagle House in Wellington, left Wellington at 18 and joined the Coldstream Guards for his national service. I remember, when I was a sort of similar age to that, he was accusing me of being a terrible wanker and not doing much for between school and university. And I said to him, well, I said, come on, what were you doing? You were my age. And he said, well, how old are you exactly? And I said, I'm 19 and 1 month. And he said, well, I was a second lieutenant in the Coldstream Guards and I was going out with Miss Sweden. A bit of a setback. So he always claimed that his proudest achievement was getting his commission into the Coldstream Guards. And his second proudest achievement was being named as the worst peacetime officer they've ever had. And in the short year he was there, subaltern, he managed to get lost while leading a convoy to Salisbury Plain and get them so bad, I mean literally a huge convoy of trucks, and so badly lost that they actually had to cancel the entire military exercise. He managed to break the top of the regimental colour going under an arch, which wasn't great. And his other one was taking a slightly dodgy girl to a formal dinner at the mess, who stole some of the regimental silver. Which, as he said, that was a bad one. His first job after the army was an advertising salesman in the Evening News, where he discovered he had a genius for selling. And I think anyone who knew him well would realise that it really was a sort of once-in-a-generation God-given talent. He regularly outsold everyone on the entire Evening News sales force combined, and then left and set up special publicity projects, making himself an absolutely ubiquitous figure in the advertising world. He discovered, and he really did discover, that by creating, he could generate revenue basically from publicity stunts and sort of plastering with advertising and then letting the press give exposure. And many people know he started with putting jackets on cows, Vladivar vodka jackets, which caused an absolute media frenzy. And my mother said to me there's sort of innumerable letters in the Times and various other places saying, tell the smarmy denizens of the advertising world to keep their hands off our countryside. And with this began sort of more and more years of equally sort of outrageous stunts. And, but they weren't always very successful. There's one great one which he always talks about, which he sort of moved on from cows to sheep, and put whiskey jackets on the sheep at the sheepdog trials. So One Man and His Dog, which was televised on the BBC. And he said there was a slight problem there, because these amazing dogs had trained all of their lives to herd sheep and not billboards. And apparently, so while this thing was being broadcast, it was live on the BBC, and these men are whistling like crazy. These poor dogs are sort of skulking at the edge of the field, seeing these awful things. From there, he discovered sport, obviously, and advertising opportunities galore, and so much of the kind of branded space that we take for granted today, he actually effectively started. He once gave Muhammad Ali $50,000, you'll see the articles there, he gave Muhammad Ali $50,000 to sport Williams furniture on his belt, to which Ali said, they're using my black ass to advertise limey furniture. Roses won himself Advertising Space of the Year. His other great claim to fame was that he ambushed the Chinese ping pong team, who were very much sort of staunchly in the kind of communist bloc, who arrived at Heathrow. And he turned up and handed them all little gym bags saying mother care on them, which they had no idea what was going on. They all took these mother care bags absolutely everywhere they went, were constantly photographed with them, which was a fairly amazing bit of advertising considering that was when they had the one-child rule at the time. So it's all really good stuff. There's a cutting in there, which just to sort of give you an idea of how sort of ubiquitous he was. There's a cutting in one of the newspapers that says, the caption reads, it's a picture of him standing sort of without a shirt, amazingly, and then behind him is a man on a tightrope with a huge pole, and there's two little banners hanging off, literally sort of, over the precipice of the Sugarloaf Mountain. And there are two banners saying rent a set from Rumbelows. But the caption reads, the posters on the balancing pole read rent a set from Rumbelows, the mountain is the Sugarloaf, and if you're thinking the man in the foreground is who we think you're thinking he is, you're absolutely right in thinking what you're thinking, which you can't really argue with. So he started in football in 1970. He was watching television with my mother and sort of watching the match, and they could see there was billboards there saying, if you want to buy this space, phone this number. So he rang them up, and so they watched the game, sort of, resolutely, desperately trying to get the number on it. And called them up and said, look, I can sell this space for you, and promptly sold all of the remaining advertising space at the 1970 World Cup in the space of an afternoon. And that's really where he began his sort of amazing relationship with FIFA and with sort of football in South America in general. I mean, it's it's quite something when you think about what it was like then and the levels of sort of corruption and danger and I mean, really. A pretty character-building crowd. I mean, he always, and I've heard these stories a million times, sort of sitting with him over the years, and there's one where one of the World Cups, there was a Brazil game, and he went into the Mothercare, which was his great favourite sponsor. He went into the changing room and said to the Brazilian team, with a picture of the Mothercare board, and said, "I'll give you $500 if you score a goal. Go and kneel down and do your celebration in front of the Mothercare board." And they all sort of gave him a thumbs up. It's a mad figure. And sure enough, anyway, so he was up in the kind of FIFA tribune in the stand, and sort of sitting at the end of this sort of long row of all the dignitaries and so on. And one of these Brazilian players scored a goal, possibly Pelé, who knows, and then ran the full length of the field, and while his team was trying to sort of give him these sort of hugs, he was dodging them to this completely silent crowd sort of at the other end, basically, and knelt down in front of this board and was crossing himself. And apparently the entire FIFA tribune sort of started seeing this amazing spectacle. All started turning towards him slowly, and he sat there sort of moving back and going, "Oh shit!" But after that, so Argentina, which was really his absolute heyday. So which is 1978, and he arrived in Argentina. It was a military junta, and there had been a coup, so I would say, 14 months before, and. Yeah, he was always very good at bribing people, as some people here would know. So he arrived there, and he found out that the chap to talk to was, well, Admiral Lacoste was the head of the organising committee, but there was a man called Martinez de Hoz, who was the economics minister and special advisor to the police, which is about as grisly as it gets. And so he called him up and said, "Look, I've got a I'm doing the tournament, I have the rights, and I've got a small contribution towards your expenses," he used to say. And this man said, "Oh, great, I'll pick you up outside your hotel." And so he was standing outside the hotel, and this enormous sort of convoy arrived of police motorbikes and this great big limousine, and he got in there, and there was this man who was effectively the devil. And handed over his brand envelope as he was wont to do, and he handed him a card and said, "This is my number, and it's a relay switch. You can get me anytime, day or night, anywhere in the world, no problem. So anywhere in the country, and any problem you have, just give me a call and I'll sort it out." And he said, "Great, I'll look forward to seeing you at the end of the tournament." And he said, "Obviously, no, I'll see you next month." And he said, "Okay, sorry, yes, absolutely." And so anyway, so everything went incredibly well during the actual event, and then they got to the semi-final, which was in Cordoba, and he arrived at this kind of this stadium and walked in, and they were taking out the Coca-Cola boards and putting Pepsi boards in, which in our business that's a setback. And so he went over to them and said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, no, you need to talk to the stadium manager, go and speak to the colonel." And it being a sort of a military dictatorship, obviously there was a sort of colonel there. So he went up to this man's office, and sure enough, behind this desk was this kind of archetypal, South American colonel with glasses and gold braid and the whole deal, and it's a bank of telephones around him. And he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "This is my stadium, and I've sold the advertising to Pepsi." He said, "You can't do that. This is a Coca-Cola, event." And he said, "No." He said, "I don't care. I've sold the advertising. It's my stadium." And he said, "Well, you can't do that. I have the rights." And he said, "Listen, if you carry on like this, I'm going to take all the boards out and basically just leave the Pepsi ones there." And he said, "Do you mind if I make a call?" And it being sort of South America in the 70s, there were no sort of switchboards, whatever. You had individual lines for each telephone, so there was a bank of telephones around this man. And while he said it, this man got a call, and it was his wife, and so he picked it up, the colonel, started fighting with his wife. So my father picked up a phone and said, got the card out and called the devil basically, and said, "Look, this is what's happening." And he said, "No problem." He said, "No problem. I'll sort it out. Just put him on." So he handed this little colonel the phone, and he took the phone while he was talking to his wife and sort of stuck it down on the table in front of him and sort of carried on fighting with her. Anyway, so he finally hung up on her, and he said, "Look, I don't care who it is, even if it's El Presidente himself, nothing's going to make me change my mind." And David knew he'd won when the man picked up the phone and he stood up and saluted. He listened for about 15 seconds, put the phone down and just said anything. He removed the balls, he was there sort of kicking the balls and the whole thing, so it's all good stuff. But, on the subject of where are we? Sorry, not carried away. It's amazing how topical all this is because you know, obviously Blatter is very much on the back foot at the moment with all the kind of corruption scandals in FIFA and so on. And you know, my father used to tell me stories about, you know, Blatter used to they'd always talk about purple ones at the end of meetings, and we'd shake hands and say purple ones, and purple ones were the sort of 500 Swiss franc notes which happened to be purple, which he used to stuff Blatter's pockets with. And Dieter, who's here somewhere, who worked with David for a long time, was in the lift they were in 2002 at the World Cup in Japan. And they were standing in the lift together, and the doors opened, and Blatter walked in with his sort of entourage. And so David stood there, very sort of respectfully, and just sort of looked at the ground, and looked straight ahead. And Blatter was staring at him, thinking, you know, who is this man? I know this man. And, you know, he hadn't been bribed by him for 20 years. And so, thinking, who is this man? Who is this man? And then, as if a kind of light went off in his wallet, he suddenly sort of lit up. He said, "My good friend." Anyway, so once the business became very sort of corporate in '82 and so on, he always maintained his rather jovial presence, and the sort of lunatic figure who wandered around fields, sort of sports fields around the world, wearing his kind of Savile Row suits and his Reeboks, which he's actually wearing today. There was one thing I remember, which I remember very excited. You know, I started working with him. Once sort of emails and computers and so on started coming out in the mid-90s, whatever it was, he used to always send handwritten and barely legible faxes, and that's how he communicated all these kind of ridiculous sort of, you know, explosive conversations which didn't really involve anything from the other side. He once got a fax from ISL, who were the big marketing company, the sort of FIFA marketing company, saying, if you continue to send us handwritten faxes, we will seriously reconsider our working relationship. Which he sort of, you know, came out of the machine, and he wrote, "Sorry, will never happen again." Thanks so much. Growing up in Brazil, obviously, it was you know, I remember just amazing amounts of laughter and obviously some sort of spectacular fights. I mean, it's a well-known fact, well publicised, that he used to cheat Victoria out of her pocket money, aged 9, playing backgammon on the grounds. It was character building, and then he played tennis every day. And there was one particular event. He had the D Maybe handicap tennis tournament, which came with this enormous trophy, I mean, this huge sort of multi-tiered thing with angels and all sorts of amazing stuff. And on the bottom was this plaque engraved saying, "Won easily and in perpetuity by D Maybe." As everyone arrived, that's one of my earliest memories. As everyone arrived, they all was handed T-shirts saying, "I lost the D Maybe handicap tennis." And he walked around with someone saying, "I won the D Maybe." And basically the handicapping was that everyone, you know, they played this series of kind of ridiculous games, including things like, you know, and he was the only person who was playing in full sort of tennis gear with his headband and the whole deal. And everyone else, sort of, you know, there's one chap who's had to carry a suitcase, and every time he scored a point, they'd load a phone book into it till he literally. And the final was against the local pro, who was a Czechoslovakian, was a
Menno.
Dutchman called Menno, who had to wear snorkel, goggles, and had flippers, and was sort of slapping around his flippers, and did incredibly well, and actually was beating him, and this is sort of the grand final. He got as far as match point, and then David disqualified him for being a professional and amateur-only tournament. He would, like Josh said, he would eat out every single night, mainly because we had a cook who he loved, and then she was appalling and just unpleasant, and we finally got rid of her and brought in this very sweet woman called Elise, who literally couldn't cook, and in defiance he basically threatened, well, he said he'd never eat it again, which he didn't, and so we would, I know Josh talked about this, but we'd always go to one of two restaurants. It was either Manolo's or Plataforma. And every single night, you know, we'd go out with him and he'd say, "We're going to try somewhere new tonight. We're going to try somewhere new live at the same fucking place." And then, you know, when we were a bit older, we did, as Josh said, we started the Maybe escort service, cash up front. And I remember when I was about 14, arriving at Manolo's, obviously, and we sort of sat down, and he produced a copy of Time magazine and started reading his magazine. And I sat there saying, you know, you've got to be kidding me, you're not going to just sit there and just read for the whole of dinner. And he said, paid work, shut up. Christmas was always an interesting time in the Maybe family. And, I remember one year, my mother literally, crying with laughter because I was about 6 and Victoria was 9, or 7 or 9, and I gave him a homemade paperweight, and Victoria had taken a comb and sort of coloured in D Maybe basically on this little sticker and stuck it on the side of the comb, and he was absolutely outraged because basically he said he said basically, my son has given me a rock he's found in the garden, and my daughter has given me my own comb back.
He'd been looking for it.
Yeah.
But he'd been looking for it. He'd been looking for it.
In New York in the 80s, one Christmas, and he didn't give presents at all. He gave us an Atari when Atari first came out, and we had this video game. We were incredibly excited about it. It only had one cartridge, which was Pac-Man, and no one had ever seen these things, and so he came there to let me have a go. And he liked it so much that he took it back. He weren't allowed to touch it, and he dedicated his life to basically playing it. And was unbelievably good at it. And so we'd hear these kind of terrible sort of screams of abuse from next door and all this sort of thing, and then cries of hopeful cries of history.
Yeah, that's right, history.
While he's breaking his record. But anyone who ever went stay with us in New York, you remember there was a sort of wraparound balcony which joined the no, sorry.
No, okay, go on. You've started. Go on. You've started.
It's fine. So there was a wraparound balcony which went around the side. And it was actually joined to the other apartment next door, and they sort of subsequently built a sort of barrier between us. But he used to basically, his system was he'd get up very early in the morning, make all his calls, and sort of scream people, whatever, do his thing, and his faxes, and then go out to lunch, have a couple of beers, and then come back, and he would play his video game, and then he would go to bed. And the terrace sort of the game was in the guest bedroom, and there was a sort of window here, and there was a chair you'd sort of sit in front of the television. You couldn't see the television, but the chair was there. And he was playing his game, wearing his dressing gown, and sort of screaming abuse at himself. And there was someone was showing the apartment. This very kind of sort of earnest realtor and these two sort of prospective clients moving in, accidentally kind of trespassed onto the wrong terrace and looked through the window to see this large man, all sort of cut up there, screaming abuse at himself. Looked out to see this and held up a joystick. We used to, it's funny because a lot of Christmases basically, if he couldn't face it, the weather's bad, whatever, we would go off at the last minute, and I'd say very loyally go with him, and we'd go off these rather exotic places and have these amazing Christmases together. It wasn't very festive, but it was good fun. But the one thing, for someone who really, he didn't care about what anyone thought about him, as you know, but the one thing he really did care about was that nobody thought that I was his boyfriend, basically. That's what it was all about. Obviously be his son. And we'd check into the hotels and he would say, my son, and we'd go into restaurants and my son had this. You could see them thinking, just forget about it, Nancy. It's one Christmas we were in Vegas, and we stayed through to New Year's, and we took next door rooms in the Flamingo, which is an amazing view of the air conditioning we had because we checked it. But he said, cool, the phone rang. He said, right, outside, 2 minutes, we're going to have dinner. And my mother that year had given me this very beautiful blue velvet suit. And so I kind of met him in the corridor. He was standing in the corridor, and I walked out of my room wearing this kind of amazing blue velvet suit with a sort of narrow collar. And he said, what the fuck are you wearing? This sort of suit that Mummy gave me. He said, I should be arrested for sodomy. I said, well, I'm not coming. He said, come on. So we went down to this Japanese restaurant, and the best thing they had for 2 people was this kind of, sort of fixed menu, whatever, and it was called the Love Boat. So it's too late now. It's all sit with all the other gay couples and enjoy ourselves. He wasn't much of one for sort of fatherly advice, and. But there was one moment I specifically remember, which was when I was 13, I was going from sort of Sunville's Walk up to Eton, and we were driving down Holland Park Avenue, and he suddenly looked shifty. And I thought, oh God, here we go. And I knew what he was going to say. He said, no. I said, you don't say it. I know exactly. It's fine. He said, no, it's important. I said, so you're going to a bigger boys' school. And I said, no, I know what you're going to say. It's fine. It's okay. He said, no, I have to say it. You don't have to say it. He said, how am I going to put this? Look, if one of the older boys asks you to dance, just say no. So my second term there, he happened to be in London. I was in the house play, which was called Zigazagger, and he actually came to see the play, which is amazing, and sort of, rather random. But so he told me he knew nothing about it at all, and I walked out on stage, and I was 13 at the time, and I played the love interest, and I was called Sandra in this play. And I walked out on stage wearing sort of fishnet stockings, high heels, brown leather miniskirt, and sort of tight t-shirt with fake boobs and wig, and I looked beautiful anyway. So I walked out on stage, and there was sort of hiss of appreciation from all these kind of boys who'd been locked up for 9 weeks. They all kind of leaned forward. The theatre's there's a 400-seater theatre, and he was up in the back row, and I heard him as I walked out on stage go, "Oh God!" So afterwards, he was standing outside in the cold, and I'd taken my makeup off and the whole thing, and put some trousers on, and he was standing, he was looking at me, and I said, walked out, and he said, got two things. He said, firstly, that's the most shameful moment of my life. And secondly, you may never sit down again. Yeah. And as he got sort of frailer and frailer towards the end, obviously he always, he was very much the same within certainly a liability, and increasingly sort of frailer and frailer without. But I remember our wedding, West London, 2 years ago. I got a call the night before our wedding. And Aladdin called me in floods of tears and said, why has your father been so rude to my father? And I said, what do you mean? So apparently, he completely blanked it. And I said, oh God, I'm so sorry, I must be, I don't know what's going on. So I rang him up, I said, what the fuck are you doing? And he said, what are you talking about? He said, I spoke to him for 20 minutes. And I said, no, she said, you completely blanked him. I said, no, I invited him to come and stay with us in London. And I said, did he have a beard? And he said, no. He said, I promise you two things. So firstly, I promise you I'll make it up to you. And secondly, I shall avoid that other man for the rest of the day. Only 2 years. So just to wrap it up, I just want to thank Clayton and Prisco, who were so fantastic towards the end, and my mother, who put up with them for 48 years and was very loving, sort of right there, and I made it by 2 hours.
1 hour. 1 hour you made it by.
No, he did get there in time. It was absolutely amazing. Victoria rang him the day before, said,